Okay, everybody settle in and get ready for video 2, the younger years. So where we left off was I was giving you guys a bit of background about the religion cult that I was born into and raised in. And yeah, I think I pretty much covered it. There's so much I could say about it, but you'll have to wait and maybe read my book. I don't know. So here's Hodges. He's gonna keep me feeling safe and secure today as I get back into this, as I dive back in. It's kind of tough. So here we go. I went to public school for like all of elementary school. It started off like in the city that I was born in, and then after 2nd grade, so I was going into 3rd grade, my parents informed us that we were moving, and I was distraught. I don't like change. I don't do well with like big changes, especially, and I was always very shy in school. Although I like made friends, I always felt like, just the classic outcast. I just felt like I wasn't really the same as everybody else. Being raised in a cult will do that to you. So we move up to a place further north with the intent of being closer to both sets of my grandparents. And we spent time living with one set of grandparents while our house was being built, and which wasn't good for reasons I'll get into probably at another day. But I had to start school in a new school. I felt so freaking weird, and like I always felt so weird, and that hasn't changed. Okay, I still feel very weird as an adult, but I can I accept it. I lean into it. I like it even. And so I just remember like 1st or 2nd week being at my new school, and this girl who took me under her wing, her name was Sarah, and I was so relieved that somebody was like plucking me out of obscurity so I didn't have to like eat lunch alone, or I had friends to play with at recess. Her friends, which I had thought were now my friends. I thought I got absorbed into the group, but after like a week or so of hanging out with them, Sarah approaches me and she's like, "Hi, we need to talk about something. It's just that ever since I introduced you to my friends, it's like you're acting like they're your friends." I was like, "Are they not? Isn't that how friendship works?" To this day, I still don't know what her intent was. Why? Maybe they were just like auditioning me, and I was not, in fact, one of the cool girls. So that group didn't really click with. But that's basically how I felt. I've felt that my whole life. I'm still trying to find like a place in this world that I feel that I fit in, but it's very hard living between two worlds. And that only got worse when middle school rolled around, and by 7th grade, by 5th grade, I had made my first plan to unalive myself pretty young. And then by 7th grade, I was engaging in very sad and self-destructive behaviors. And I became very compulsive about self-harm. I did that a lot. That felt like an escape for me. I knew about depression, but this was like early 2000s. When I was in 7th grade, it was like the year 2002, 2003. So the culture was only just starting to be like it was rare being a kid put on antidepressants, okay? We just didn't have the attention span, or we just didn't care about people's mental health like we do now, which is great. So I eventually got so bad that I did get sent to the school counselor, and I was able to, for the first time in my life, utilize that as a resource. And it's something that I still do. I think everybody should get therapy. There's probably a reason you need it. So seeing a counselor since I was in 7th grade, and I remember it felt like such a big deal. I felt like I was the only one in school that was having these thoughts, that was feeling this level of like dread day in and day out. You know, I didn't want to go home, and I didn't want to go to school. So I had on my binder, I wrote like all over, like, I hate school and I hope I die. And I think I had very like apparent marks also. So I had one teacher, my biology teacher. She like was passing out papers, and she got to my desk and she stopped and she paused and she was like, "Are you okay?" I don't remember what I said. It probably was just like, yeah, obviously not okay. And I remember that same teacher, she cut me a lot of slack. Like, we got assigned a group project. This one dumb girl like messed it up in one single like motion, and I had to break down in class, and my teacher was just like, it's okay, like, don't worry about this. You clearly have a lot more on your plate. So 7th grade was really rough, but I made it through. And then I think I had like a very hard summer. So much so that before the 8th grade year was set to start, my parents called me into the office, which is where we'd like be punished and where we'd be like interrogated. So you knew it's never a good thing to be called into dad's office. Like, even just that saying gives me like a pit in my stomach. I feel like I want to throw up. I feel like acid, like spicy green and yellow acid, is coursing through my veins, just like reliving it. But that's what we have Hodges for. I just remember, like, obviously I was excited for 8th grade and going back to school, even though it was like tough. And my parents just sat me down and they very matter-of-factly informed me, you're not going back to school. And I was like, what? And they're like, we've decided that you can't handle it. You're too mentally unstable. And, you know, they posed it as like, well, we want to give you a break so you can focus on your mental health and get better. And to any other kid, that might have been like, woohoo, I got a year off. But to me, I was devastated, because that just meant, I knew that meant I was going to be that much more closed off. You know, going to public school really allowed me to embrace like other cultures and religions outside of the one I was born into. So that felt like a prison sentence. And I spent 8th grade year not doing homeschool. What I did essentially was go to Costco with my mom and come home and watch Dr. Phil like every day. I am pretty certain what they did was illegal. Feels neglectful. But, you know, maybe it was for the best. Maybe the pressures of being in school at that point would have been too much, and maybe I wouldn't be here today. I'll tell you this much, though, being stuck at home with the super religious like atmosphere that I did not want to be in, that didn't do wonders for my mental health either. And worst of all, I felt so behind. You know, education aside, obviously I skipped a year of like education, but socially, oh my gosh, I felt like, if I ever get back to public school, I'm gonna be that much weirder. Like, I remember feeling terrified that people had already forgotten about me, which to this day I still struggle with understanding if I'm real. Some object permanence there, because by time freshman year came around, my parents did let me attend the freshman orientation that was going on at the public school. I think they were like giving me a chance to test the waters to see if I should be allowed. back into the system or kept under their thumb. And at the freshman orientation, like my friends were running up to me, friends who hadn't seen me in like a full school year, because mind you, MySpace was still like 2 years away from being invented. So no way to stay in contact. And my friends were running up to me like, oh my God, what happened to you? You were here and then you were gone. Like nobody, I didn't even get to say goodbye. That really pissed me off too, is that my parents didn't let me attend one last day in 8th grade to explain. It just overnight, they were like, you're not going. So I was really excited, and I was also very like awkward going back to school, but I was like, okay, I can get back into the swing of things, and I can handle being like so severely like depressed and so like just like inner turmoil, being at home, being around my whole family. And I got to attend freshman year at a public high school all of 2 weeks before my parents pulled me out again. Here we go again, I thought. I had been like emailing some boy that I instantly like had a crush on, and they didn't, and by the way, my parents were snoops, you know, they read all my stuff. They went through my room constantly, and there was no privacy. Totally enmeshed. It's super healthy, right? So they immediately were like, you're not going back, you're not going to see that boy. And they meant it. And so I spent the next 2 years kind of attending a private school, but it was like a Baptist private school. And I don't know if you're familiar, but like that's a war. Like Baptists don't like Mormons, and Mormons don't like Baptists because they're not Mormon. And people, you know, it was made known that I was like the Mormon girl at school. So I would have teachers like openly, because like it's a religious private school, by the way, so they could like preach doctrine during science class. And my teachers would stand up and be like, okay, and everybody gather around because tonight we're having the bonfire and we're going to be tossing Book of Mormons into the bonfire and watch them burn. And I was like, cool, sounds good to me. But it did make me feel very like singled out, put on the spot. It made me uncomfortable, and but I did think it was pretty funny when classmates would approach me asking to feel my horns, because they had been taught that Mormons are born with horns. Yeah, very cool, very swag. So that was madness. Freshman and sophomore year. I eventually convinced my parents to let me go back by junior year. I don't remember. I must have been on like okay-ish behavior, but I was still getting into trouble constantly. I was like pushing back a lot, you know, through your teen years. That was all I felt I had to live for, you know. My angst really fueled me and became my main identifier. Like if I didn't have that anger within me, I would risk ending up like another sheep, you know, just like a lamb led to slaughter. I didn't want that. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew it wasn't that. And I think I'm still kind of like, I stay in that mindset. So I'm still trying to find out, like, what do I want? I know I'm very thoroughly well versed in what I don't want. Time to start like looking forward. Not always, I just recently started saying like, yes, I started work on healing my inner child, that little toddler, and that certainly that like teenager with all that angst within her. But I'm now also practicing on taking care of future me, so adult me. And as I'm sure you can understand, being removed from school like that and just like kept at home and indoctrinated multiple times a week going to church, I came out of that feeling so developmentally behind my peers. I technically graduated from that school senior year, but with like a 7th grade education. So I graduate, I got a car, I bought my own little crappy car. I also had gotten into certain pastimes. And I remember one night, it was actually the night that Where the Wild Things Are, that movie was gonna come out, and I worked at a movie theater at that point, so I was really excited to go to the premiere with my friends and my boyfriend at the time. So I got all dressed up. Like, there's pictures of this outfit somewhere on the internet, like on my mom's blog, but I looked like a wild thing. I looked ridiculous. And my mom took me, she was like, let's go. I remember her being really excited. She's like, let's go take pics. There's a tree that fell down the street by our neighbor's house that would be perfect for you to pose on. I was like, great. So we go, we take pics, and it's fun, and I'm really hyped. And then, you know, like, I'm out of school, woo, I'm gonna spend so much time with my friends and figure out who I am and where I want to go next in life, what I want to do. So we walk back home and we approach our house, and there's my dad, the big angry lug that he is. And he's just standing in the driveway, acting as like a physical block, like a barrier to me so that I cannot enter the house. I remember he's standing there by my car, and I'm like, oh crap. So it turns out my parents had come up with this very clever ruse to lure me away from the house and from my car that I paid for, just so that my dad could ransack it and find whatever evidence he was looking for. And he did in fact find some paraphernalia, I'll just say, of something that you know as Mary Jane. And it was a pitiful amount. It was like a dub sack. I don't even know if I could say that, but tiny. And so, you know, fast forward, they proceeded to grill me on our front porch for then, it felt like hours. I think it probably was a couple hours because we watched the sun set as that happened. And I was under the impression that the sheriff was on his way, because that's what they told me. They said they called the cops on me. And my mom, I remember she was in tears, and she told me, she was like, because I was like, you called the police on a Friday night for this? They're going to be so annoyed that you dragged them out here for this. Believe me. And my mom goes, no, they're not. No, they're not. They're going to be so thrilled that they could help prevent another future drug addict out on the street. And to which I just was like, okay, your guys' perception is not the same as my perception, because we do not exist in the same planes of reality. And that's like, that was confirmation. Like, my whole life hadn't been. So they had me out there for like another hour, and eventually I was like, where's the cop? Can we get this over with? I got a movie to go to. Mind you, I'm still dressed as a wild thing. And one of my parents just fesses up. They're like, we didn't call the police. We just wanted to scare you. I was like, okay, mission accomplished. And some really awful, hurtful things were said to me that night. My dad called me a whore. He accused me of being a whore and accused me of like trading certain favors with my boyfriend in exchange for drugs. And I was like, no, that's not a business deal. That's just what boyfriend and girlfriends do. And then that night, I also remember him telling me that he is biologically bound to love me, but he doesn't like me, and he never has. And then the climax of the evening was when they gave me an ultimatum. And they were like, okay, you can either get right and continue living with us in the family in our home, but you have to abide by every single one of our rules, or you can pack your stuff and go tonight. And there was no hesitation for me. I knew what I had to do. And I was like, okay, this is how it ends. So my parents gave me 2 trash bags and said, fill that and then get out of here. And they didn't even let me say goodbye to my siblings. And I'll never forgive them for that. That still haunts me. My siblings just waking up the next morning and I'm gone. And I know my parents must have told them some like cockadoodie story that it was like my idea or I ran off in the night, but it wasn't. And I know that because before I left, my parents were like, you listen here. You don't get to go around telling people a sob story that we kicked you out. You made this choice, so you don't get to have that frame of mind. And I was like, oh, is that what's happening here? And I'm 18 now for the first time on my own. I think I'm going to tell people whatever the heck I want for the first time in my life without fearing retaliation from you guys or punishment. So from there, I made it to the movie. I do not remember a second of it, though. I was in quite a state, but at least I had a car and I had 2 trash bags full of my stuff. Things only got more wild and way worse from there, but this video's already gone on for far too long, so that will be for another day. Thanks.